No, that's what I was questioning. All right. 2 minutes. Ginny, we'll look to you for since you've been coordinating with everybody on when we should get started. And
I'm trying to imagine who's missing.
yeah, the gang's all here.
Everyone, I say, as soon as everyone's set up, we can go ahead and start.
No, I don't think you have been. Yeah, one more minute. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
She's ready. Mayor.
Oh, yeah. Jennifer, come on.
Hi. Great. I was just wondering. Here we
Okay,
are.
we're good.
Okay, I think we have filled out this room more so than ever. This is impressive. Thanks.
Yeah, good.
Okay.
Thank you all for being here.
Yeah, very much appreciate everybody being here. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and get us started then. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrea Davis, Mayor for the City of Missoula, and joined by some members of council and also some members of our service provider team, both that provide obviously operations for the Johnson Street, but also for the housing sprint work and just in general the work that we do as we create different strategies and solutions for houselessness in Missoula. So with that, I'll just ask people to do a quick introduction of folks that are here to join me, if that's okay, starting with you, Councillor.
I'm Councilman Mike Nugent, represent Ward 4.
Jill Bonney, Executive Director of the Poverello Center.
Susan A. Patrick, CEO of United Way of Missoula County.
Great. Jennifer?
Jennifer Savage, Ward 1, on City Council.
Gwen Jones, City Council, Ward 3.
Stacy Anderson, City Council, Ward 5.
All right. We obviously don't have all of our city council here because that would require a quorum, and so we have asked members of the chairs of council to join. President and Vice President, President Sherrill and Vice President Becerra could not be here with us today, and so with that, we'll get started. So as you saw from the press release and the information that we provided through our frequently asked questions, I've made the decision to, along with counsel and guidance from our city council leadership, that we will not be continuing funding for the Johnson Street Emergency Shelter after August of 2025. The city has contracted with the Poverello Center for the last couple of years now for year-round funding. And this is due to a funding shortfall because we have utilized one-time only federal funding to operate the Johnson Street shelter. The cost to operate the shelter and our operational contract with the Poverello Center is $1.8 million annually, and the city just simply does not have the ability to absorb that in our general fund. This is a conversation that didn't come as a surprise. We've had conversations with our leaders in the service provider sector and certainly with city council and members of the public for some time, knowing that this was a likelihood. And so as we think about how to do this most responsibly, we are excited to talk about how we will wind down the shelter in a very methodical way alongside a housing sprint. So we will start from April through August, decreasing the census of the shelter. The city itself will work alongside our service partners to create a team to work with guests of the shelter to connect people with permanent housing, so with rental housing. We're going to connect people with, reunite them with friends and family. We will be helping folks also reach and connect to appropriate services like treatment or recovery. And to do that, we are putting together a housing sprint fund, and our friends at the United Way, who manage the Housing Solutions Fund, will be managing that for the community. And so this will be a combination of public and private funds. It's an opportunity for the public to, this is one of our ways the public can actually help today, is helping contribute to this fund. We know this to be successful because over the holidays, we worked together to do what's called the Home for the Holidays Housing Sprint. And it was a pilot program. We set out to house 15 veterans that are homeless, and we were able to house 12 of those individuals over the course of 60 days. We did that through a very, might I say, aggressive approach to really leaning in, working to secure rental homes through basically maybe renting out homes for a month or two, paying off rents that are in arrears or utilities that are in arrears. Those are the kinds of things that hold people back often from being able to get into a rental home. Sometimes when folks don't have great credit or they don't have great rental records and rental histories, landlords will turn them down. And so it's an opportunity for us to work with landlords to help them resolve some of their legitimate concerns. These are not illegitimate concerns often. So sometimes it's just a matter of increasing the security deposit so that they will rent to somebody that has greater barriers than the majority of the market. We know that there are a lot of people living in shelter that have jobs that really just need this additional help, and we know that there are folks that have a whole host of other barriers that we'll be working closely and carefully on to help folks get connected to the right kind of resources. And so I want to emphasize that we cannot do this. We are doing this in partnership with our service partners. The houseless leaders in the community have expressed their willingness to work with the city to have this thoughtful unwind of the shelter facility. And we are planning on, once the shelter is closed this fall, we will plan on a deconstruction of that warehouse. So City Council established a timeline for the administration to deconstruct the warehouse there on Johnson Street by September of 2026. And so we'll get ahead of that a little bit by starting in the fall of 2025. So there's a lot more that I'd love to cover. I'm sure there's a lot of questions. The last thing I'd like to say now and then emphasize again is that there are two opportunities for action for our community. One is that the United Way is the organization that manages and helps fund, as does the city and other private entities and the county, the United Way Housing Solutions Fund. This is a flexible fund that helps people with a security deposit. If something comes up, right, where you're living paycheck to paycheck, and many people do, and you all of a sudden have a car repair that you can't now afford your rent, the Housing Solutions Fund can help plug that hole, help keep people stable in their home. So the Housing Solutions Fund will be the repository for this housing sprint. Again, we need to raise $400,000, and I think we can do it all day long. We'll probably need more money, but we're going to start with $400,000. We know this because of the scale. We're scaling up from what we know from our home house for the holidays over the wintertime. And so the United Way's Housing Fund, Susan, I think people can give right online.
Absolutely.
Easiest way.
UnitedWay.org/donate. But there's also, as of 1 o'clock today, a banner on the website that talks about the sprint and welcomes contributions.
Okay, great,
And then
thank
the-
you. And then the Housing Advocate Network, you bet. So the Housing Advocate Network is a program through the Missoula Interfaith Collaborative, and they've been active for some years now in Missoula, where everyday Missoulians are working alongside folks that are houseless to help them get connected to housing. And it's been a fantastic program that many of us, and I say us because, you know, for 2 decades I was in the affordable housing sector, and we would rely on this organization as a way to informal case management. It was really folks helping people fill out applications, understand where to go next, and be that encouraging friend to keep going when they ran into barriers. I have people all the time, and I think you do too, that say, how can I help? This is a great way to help. 2 ways. Donate to the Housing Solutions Fund, Housing Sprint Fund, and sign up to be a housing advocate or a network with the Housing Advocates Network through the Missoula Interfaith Collaborative. They are holding a an event. In fact, I think
Training and orientation.
yes, a training and orientation.
March 12,
Thank you.
5:30 to 7:30,
Excellent.
right?
Yes, I do. I'm looking for that specific information in front of me right here. Here it is. Yes, exactly. So the Missoula Interfaith Collaborative, the Housing Advocate Network, are hosting an orientation for interested community members on Wednesday, March 12th from 5:30 to 7 at their offices, 2205 34th Street. We'll make sure that that is on our website. The city has a website that is up and running with all of this information, including frequently asked questions, so people that are living in shelter can get that information as well as the general public. But we encourage Missoulians to join us and put forward these housing-focused solutions. We think that this closure of the shelter, while it is a significant situation and decision, actually offers our community a path forward in a way that we are moving naturally through the new strategy to address homelessness. The number one strategy identified in the On Our Way Home plan is to right-size shelter. And right-sizing shelter does not necessarily mean we're going to continue to build larger and larger congregate shelters. It in fact means that we're going to create the right size of shelter for our community because we're focused on housing solutions for folks. Because at the end of the day, the solution to homelessness is housing. And that's where I want to see the city put its resources and our community put its resources too. When talking with shelter guests, as early as yesterday, folks are there because they have to be, but they would much rather have a home in which it's their own four walls, more dignified. It might look like they have roommates, great, but living on a mat on a shelter is a temporary situation, and I think all of us think that and know that we can provide a better situation for folks in our community. Anything else? Anything that you wish to comment on before we take questions?
I would just add to the mayor's statement that the John Street shelter is on the edge of Ward 4. And when I introduced the resolution 2 years ago now to set this timeline, it's because many on council were frustrated that we were doing the same thing over and over again instead of trying to come up with new solutions to try and make a difference and make a real impact. And I really just want to commend the mayor and the staff for taking that to heart and recognizing that this timeline was there and finding a creative solution for us to try. And we all know that sometimes you try things and they might not work, but we aren't going to make progress unless we take those bold steps. And I really am excited for this shift to really focusing on connecting people to housing. And I think we can be successful.
No.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah, I think it really shows leadership that you are willing to sort of look at something that doesn't seem to be working and coming up with new solutions. I know that there will be folks in the community who are upset that we are making this transition, but I think that, you know, the model that we ran during the test pilot program, what we ran over Christmas, to kind of try this out, and then you know, looking at cues from other communities. Spokane did something similar and have had good success. So I think that, you know, again, applause to you and the staff. I think that making sure housing housing first is the most important, but also understanding that what we are doing hasn't been working, and it was meant to be a temporary solution. I was on council during COVID, and we set up these shelters because we saw an increase in unhoused people in our community, and we needed to act quickly, and that has evolved into different shapes and sizes, and Johnson Street has been sort of the temporary establishment that we've had in our community, but it was never meant to be long term. And so eventually at some point in time, this time was going to come, and especially with the fact that the crisis levy didn't pass. And so now, you know, I think we are taking some bold steps and really need the community to partner with us. People are maybe getting tax refunds, and so this was an excellent time to contribute to the Housing Solutions Fund. And if this is, you know, if we all pull together, I think that we can get some people who, you know, really should be in housing, and then just, you know, provide better services for our least among us in our community.
Yeah. I would love to turn over to questions. And one thing I would like to say before I do that is that I want to express my gratitude to the staff. Erin and her team have put some very careful thought and quickly together, but it's been a body of research we've been working on for a while. This is, so Erin Pehan, the Director of Community Planning, Development, and Innovation. We as the city, our role is largely the convener and the entity helping our community pull together ways in which we are doing continuous improvement for our systems. And so we work with experts like Jill Bonney with the Poverello Center, like Susan Haypatrick with the United Way, and other providers as things are evolving. And this space is very iterative. What was once best practice, and I put that in quotes because quite frankly, I don't even know what best practice is anymore. But one of the things that we are seeing as with emerging success is coming back to this radical common sense that housing is the solution to homelessness, and that has been effective across the country. And we've seen some examples. New Orleans is an example, and some other places regionally here, where we focus on getting folks into housing and then keeping them stable there. So retention is a very big aspect to this, and I'm going to go back to the Housing Advocates Network. That is an organization that we could find more folks that are willing to do light touches and check on folks once they are in a place to see how they're doing and if they need anything to stay stabilized there. But this is not something that was created in a vacuum. It's actually created with a lot of technical assistance from folks working on this issue around the country. And as you know, and you've done interviews with us before on this housing sprint that we did over the holidays, the city of Missoula has been selected as Built for Zero community. We're one of 100 communities around the country, or excuse me, around the world, that are taking data to be able to break down a smaller group of folks that are living with houselessness and really lean into different methods to help people get out of houselessness and into housing, and then taking that and applying that to other groups of folks. And so this is a way that we can achieve what's called functional zero, right? We know that we're never going to stop homelessness in its entirety, but if somebody enters into houselessness, then one person is getting out, and we're not increasing
With
those
the goal
numbers.
of making houselessness rare, brief, and one time only.
Exactly right.
Can I just
Exactly.
add?
Please
I
do.
want to say and give credit to Jill and the POV. The Johnson Street Shelter was an important and necessary resource, especially during COVID.
Absolutely.
And they have done a heroic job with limited resources to house people. But I do see this current sprint as a continuation of the city's longstanding commitment to housing as the solution to homelessness rather than shelter, beginning with the initial 10-year plan, which created the Missoula Coordinated Entry System, which prioritizes people for housing based on those with the greatest needs, seeing housing first and surrounding them with services and the resources they need. And I think the success of the Housed for the Holidays program, where Missoula housed more veterans than any other municipality participating in the program in Montana, gives us reason to believe that this could be successful, along with the fact that the Housing Solutions Fund has helped more than 2,000 Missoulians get into housing quickly or stay housed over the last 4 years. So we know that we're landing the plane as we're building it.
Yeah.
And that this is there are a lot of unknowns, but I think that those of us who are part of the Houseless Leaders Group believe that we have to try something, and we're going to try this ambitious, well thought out, albeit imperfect, effort to house as many people as we possibly can who are currently in Johnson Street. Some will need a lot of resources, some will need fewer.
Yeah. Yeah, both Jill and Susan worked carefully alongside our team here, Dylan Barbash and Emily Armstrong, during the housing sprint. So folks that were working hand in hand with those veterans to find a home are here to answer questions, and that's it. Some require no help at all, and some require more. So many different circumstances. Jill, did you want to have a chance to say anything before questions?
No, I mean, the POV's been here for 50 years, and we're going to continue to just do what we've been doing and offer food, shelter, help, and hope to all who ask. We have not been at capacity for the last while. We can probably fit another 20 to 30 people in the shelter, and so we want to make sure that people who still need shelter as this happens can come to the POV. And also, we are committed to working on this housing sprint and getting people, as many people as we can, to better solutions.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, let's open it up for questions. Yeah, let's start with you, Peter.
A couple of quick questions. You may have some fence mending to do with some of the folks on the council. I think all of us probably received the emails from right after the press release came out about, hey, are we going to have a meeting about this? So is it what we have here is failure to communicate issue, or has the communication already been done and these are just kind of folks that are not liking the result?
I do believe it's the latter. In a situation like this where you have a sensitive decision from the administration and leadership, this is the start of public communication. As you can imagine, the sensitivity around stability for shelter guests and the staff and employees of the Poverello actually were my number one priority. These are folks that have been dedicated to serving these folks day in and day out. Rumor mills can really trigger instability and offer very little help oftentimes. And so I believe this was a wise choice to be able to roll up the communications the way it has. Certainly I'll be addressing this at City Council on Monday evening, and then we'll have the opportunity going forward.
My last question, I promise. What has the reaction been? You said you've talked to some of the folks who are housed within the Johnson Street shelter. What's the overall mood there? Once they found out, oh, this is eventually going to have to be closing by this date. What was the mood with those folks?
I have to turn that over to Jill.
Yeah, I mean, they're just finding out today, so I'm not sure what the mood is. We are conducting a, meeting or group setting next week with all of them to hopefully answer as many questions as we can and talk about a housing sprint. So I'll know more then, but
That'll be a little bit scary.
And your staff also met with people to determine what their needs, what are these barriers to housing, and what services might people need, just to get a sense of how to respond.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a direction that we've been going as a city and Poverello with our memorandum of understanding over this last year. And so, in fact, that's actually been something that's been great to see the Poverello Center staff working with shelter guests to understand what folks' needs are. We'll be utilizing that.
And with the passage of Mr. Nugent's resolution to put a timeline, I mean, we knew that we were working our way towards ultimate closure of the Johnson Street facility.
Right.
And so I think the solutions that we were coming up with were already in the works, and we just, are kind of pivoting as we recognize that the money we have currently set aside for it is, running out, and we need to pivot accordingly. But I don't think that there was ever a sense within the community that there was always going to be the Johnson Street facility, and so.
No.
I've got a few questions, but I'll stick to just a couple first so we can get around the room.
Okay.
How many people have been staying at Johnson Street Shelter recently?
Like within the last week, it's been between 150 and 165.
Right. And the trial housing sprint for veterans over the winter housed 12 successfully. Is that right?
That is correct. And we started out with a list of 15.
Great. And that was over the course of a couple months?
It was 60 days, yep.
Okay, super. How much does the city have on hand financially right now for this housing sprint over the next 4 to 5 months?
So our goal is going to be putting together $400,000, and so we are. We know we'll be able to achieve that. We've got some dollars that we believe that we'll be able to add, but we also know that we have private sector folks that are ready, and it is a request that I have of the community to start helping contribute to this. I've had folks from the business community and folks from around Missoula ask me, when you're ready to do something, let me know. So funding the Johnson Street shelter the way it was not really something people were wanting to fund per se, but when they wanted to see something that actually offers hope to find housing, I think we're going to have people ready to give.
Does the city have anything on hand right now dedicated to the housing sprint financially?
We will be able to start the housing sprint in April.
Okay, and then one other thing, is the goal with the housing sprint to house all 150 to 165 residents of Johnson Street Shelter by the time it closes in August?
No, I would say, yeah, I mean, it depends on the outcomes. I would say we're realistic, that 150 or 60 people are likely not going to find permanent housing by August. That's why we're helping people connect with permanent housing. We're helping people connect with permanent rental housing. We're helping people reunite with family and friends, and so that's a reality. People eddy out in Missoula. We know people get here and can't get home. Quite frankly, can't afford to get home. And then we'll also be connecting people with treatment and recovery services. So I mean, I think we need to be very real with you all, the public, that we don't expect 180 people to get into permanent housing by August, and we will be doing the best we can, however, to make the most impact we can for those folks. As if people are taking to sleeping outdoors, then we will help them do that successfully in accordance with the existing ordinance.
Thank you.
You bet. Yeah, go right ahead.
Hey, Lauren with the poll. I noticed also in the FAQs that the city has decided that it won't be operating like a fixed camping site, and I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about those conversations and what went into that decision, given the conversation that you guys just had here.
Yeah, so the ordinance that the City Council passed allows for a authorized campsite to be allowable if a feasible proposal comes forward. There has not been a feasible proposal that has been submitted. So I want to emphasize that the City Council has made that legal if a feasible proposal comes forward. Our service providers, our houseless leaders, actually worked on a pro forma, putting some information on the table, and the size of gap that is a reality of what it would take to have an authorized campsite work successfully is sizable, and I think it's to the tune of $1 million, if I'm not mistaken. And so the city will be putting any kind of resources towards getting people housed, not camping in an encampment.
Mm-hmm. Will any of the money saved by closing Johnson Street be put towards housing in some way, or I mean, can you just maybe talk a little bit generally about the city's financial situation, like what sort of need is, and,
you bet.
And why can't we keep the shelter open while putting money towards housing?
Well, quite simply, and this gets kind of wonky and boring quick because it's tax policy from the state 101, but the city has what we call a structural deficit, which means in our general fund, we can only increase by 1/2 of a rolling 3 years of inflation. So every single year, we actually are in the hole. And the only way that we can actually make that up is through new growth. Okay, so it's the way that different tax structures are made. So the way Johnson Street was funded was through ARPA dollars from the federal government. Those were state and local recovery funds. I will say that the city of Missoula generously supported a shelter. We could have done other work that would have augmented our budget, quite frankly, and other cities did that. But the city did fund the Johnson Street shelter for as long as it had available funds for it. We obviously used ARPA dollars for other needs that the city had over the course of the pandemic. So we are starting FY26 already with constraints on our general fund that will require me to make other hard decisions going forward and proposals to City Council, and you'll see those through the budget process. So this is an ongoing structural situation. We talk about this, and I know that talking about inflation kind of makes people's eyes glaze over, but the reality is inflation for our budget has eaten our budget up, and we have budgetary costs that far outweigh the average cost of inflation. So when we talk about asphalt inflating to, at one point in the last couple of years, to a 70% increase, that is far higher than the average rate of inflation that the rest of the United States is seeing in general. Mm-hmm. So it's just something that we're constantly managing. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Certainly one line of argument I've seen is that, especially now with the possibility that there's potentially more people on the street than there are now, or more people requiring services, that there's a lot of money being put towards enforcement, policing, security, private security, et cetera, that maybe could be put towards housing or maybe help offset the perennial deficit the municipal governments in Montana I'm wondering what you think about that.
Well, what I think is that the reality is that the city will always have to, not only the city of Missoula, but every city I know, every mayor I talk to, and every city council I talk to, no matter how much money they put into shelter and housing, they are still managing what is happening on the street. So that's a reality that we have to face as a city. I would much rather put money into housing than I would have to put into enforcement of people camping on the street. So we're actually looking to use our existing budget authority to create the way that we're structuring our enforcement implementation is to help people sleep outside successfully in accordance with the ordinance and connect those folks with services and resources. So that is the way that the city will be approaching it, and that is a reality that we face, and every city does. Other questions, please?
Yeah, could you just further elaborate on why it wasn't necessary for all of the city council members to have an input on this decision just going forward?
Because this wasn't a council decision. I did have council input from our city council chairs, and so city council leadership, but I have not brought this forward to city council for a decision because this is an administrative decision for the eventual closure of the Johnson Street. If city council wants to make a decision to find $2 million in the city's budget to keep Johnson Street open, then that will be a council decision, and we'll go through that through the budget process.
And I would just add to that, council did have the opportunity to weigh in on this when we passed the resolution instructing the city to find a solution to close it down within X number of years. So the mayor, working within her responsibilities, and the city staff has done that. And, I think that part of being in leadership on council, part of being a city council member is it's not headlines, it's not social media posts, it's working together to try and find solutions. And, we're happy to be working with the staff and working with the mayor to try a new approach.
And I think through the budget process last year, it was we were well aware of the ongoing financial constraints and the fact that the ARPA dollars were running out, and we were funding the Johnson Street facility through the remains of our ARPA dollars, but we did not identify any additional resources in last year's budget to, augment the running out of ARPA dollars and then identifying long-term additional monies to continue to operate it. And I think with the resolution that we passed, there was we knew Johnson was closing. We knew what the funds we were using to fund it, that there was a timeline to spend all those, and there was a limited number, and that at some point we were going to get to this point.
Thank you.
Yeah, so just thinking about the permanent word that you're putting in with housing there, changes happen all the time.
Yeah.
Housing situations, can definitely vary. What is the plan to make something permanent for someone considering all these outside factors?
Yeah, generally speaking, we're looking to get people into market housing. So market rate housing, conventional housing. That's what we mean by permanent housing. That when we say that, it's not an emergency shelter. Transitional housing, people are often like, well, what is transitional housing? Transitional housing, if it's in a group home setting, could be 30, 60, 90 days, could be 6 months. Transitional housing can often be up to 18 months, depending on the funding agency that runs that program. And we don't have any, there are transitional housing opportunities that we can absolutely look to see how people would move from a shelter situation into transitional housing and then eventually into permanent housing. But permanent housing means people have their home and
are able to sustain it.
able to sustain it, exactly, yeah.
Brick and mortar, 4 walls, they get to stay where they where they want to stay.
Yeah.
And then thinking about the Poverello side, you said you're not at full capacity. With this closure, do you expect to change the capacity? Do you think there might be an increase in people coming over to the POV?
I think there'll be an increase in people coming, but we won't increase that 150 cap. It's really where we could be in being safe.
It's very fluid.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Griffin.
Yeah, so going back to budget last year, the city signed a 2-year contract with Poverello. Did you believe then that it was going to last for 2 years, or were you expecting it for just 1 year?
Well, it's in that contract. It's explicitly states that there is only 1 year of funding, and so that the reason for a 2-year contract was to align with the resolution that councilors have talked about today, which was the time period by which the warehouse needs to be taken down. And so we signed that also with the horizon that if we could come up with funding in the second year, that this would be our overall commitment. But knowing that we can't, then we're also following what is in the contract, which is for a 1-year period.
And approximately when did you realize the second year just wasn't feasible?
Oh, approximately, let's see, we're in March. I would say that this became quite apparent in February. So we started putting these plans together in the last couple of weeks and have been actively getting ready for this announcement.
Yeah. And then going to the housing sprint, you mentioned $400,000. Do you have a maximum of city funds that you would commit to it?
I do not have a maximum of city funds, but we don't have a lot of city funds, which is why we're not keeping the shelter open. And so I'm going to be asking other folks to help contribute to this fund because the city does not have a whole lot of additional money beyond what it's already supporting through the work that we already do to support houselessness programs. You know, I'll remind folks that the city does quite a bit behind the scenes to help ensure that the city's ability to address effectively getting people into homes continues. So we are the administrator for the coordinated entry system, for example. We are the administrator for the continuum of care. In other communities, these often are picked up by nonprofits. The city has committed to funding these through our staff and departments here, and so our resources are going to continue to go towards those efforts, and we will figure out a way to we contribute to the housing sprint. Contributing all $400,000 will not be possible.
Yeah. Any money that is contributed to the housing sprint, does it need city council approval?
If it's within this budget year and it is within its budget line item, likely not. No. If there's additional or new requests, then it would. We'd need a budget amendment.
And then do you foresee this becoming maybe an annual expenditure to keep people in housing using housing sprints, or is this a one-time $400,000 attempt?
Well, this will be an attempt because of the particular situation with the unwinding of the shelter. I think ongoing, however, this is an opportunity for us and our community to fund. The Housing Solutions Fund has been in place for how long, Susan?
4 years.
4 years, exactly. And so we know that this has been one of the best things we can have in our community as a flexible fund to help step in when people need help. And I would say that that's going to be an ongoing need that we have. Whether that is an ongoing expenditure of the city or not, that's to be determined. Based on our ongoing budget constraints, I would not make a commitment to that today.
Okay.
Well, and I think it's also kind of understanding what type of help we're talking about here. And we have often said, or I have often said on council, that Johnson Street is a very broad solution that does not take into account people's individual needs. Well, for the next April through August, it's going to be very focused on the individual needs. So is it that your cousin lives in Great Falls and you just haven't been able to get to Great Falls? We can help you with that. If you're working and you cannot come up with first, last, and deposit, then the Housing Solution Funds can help you with that. So that is the type of individualized resources that we're talking about through this sprint that we found with the Home for the Holidays. Some folks needed quite a bit of, some just needed help figuring out how to, they had vouchers that they didn't even know that they didn't know how to access and utilize those vouchers. And so I think that, asking the community to help fund the housing fund at the United Way is a way to kind of have those resources available, because we as the city do not have all the money in which to execute the sprint, and so we need the public and private sector to step in and help out. And that is what, if your barrier is you just haven't been able to come together with first, last, and deposit, once you get there, hopefully, the ongoing rent each month is a little bit more of an easier nut to crack versus all up at once.
Just to follow up to that, I mean, you mentioned people being, reconnected with family in Great Falls. Davis mentioned, people land in the Eddy. Is the city potentially buying people bus tickets to get on Missoula?
So the way the housing, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that's a really oversimplification to the conversation.
The way the Housing Solution Fund works is that if a caseworker verifies with great credibility that there's somebody on the other end who will give that person a home where they have a job or are eligible for supports that can keep them housed, then we have bought bus tickets. The most common use is first and last month's rent, security deposit, identification for people who've never had a permanent ID, application fees, which are a great burden. Every property owner and property manager and landlord has different application fees. So it would not just be get out of town. Other municipalities do that. That has not been in keeping sort of with the way Missoula has operated.
Sounds like you need a plan before you give them the bus ticket.
Absolutely, absolutely. Any other questions, please?
Yeah, I'm curious about the kind of team of folks that are going to be working with people during the sprint. You know, who's going to make up that team, and how is that going to work? Is it going to be folks who were working at Johnson Street, and you know, how are those people paid for?
Yeah, absolutely. Erin, do you want to elaborate on that at all, or would you like me to take a swing at it?
Yeah, we have several staff members within our houseless programs, our policy and program team here within the city of Missoula. They spearheaded the House for the Holiday Sprint, where we got our first experience with this model, and so we'll be temporarily lending that capacity to this effort. A lot of this work in terms of finding units within the community, providing that assistance with applications, or checking in with folks after their house to help them retain that housing. That's work that happens in the community at some level already. And so we'll be coordinating with those providers and identifying what capacity they can lend, and then also working with networks like the Housing Advocate Network to bring in volunteer resource. And so we're still in the early phases of building out that plan, but we know we have a lot of short-term capacity that we can redirect to this effort over the next 5 months.
Yeah, and I know there's going to be some variation, like was mentioned, of people who need a lot of wraparound help and people who need less. I guess just curious about people who do need more intensive help. You know, are there, you know, is there going to be capacity for that? You know, for people who are dealing with the really high barriers of mental health or substance use struggles, and you know, are there also concerns about being able to get them into treatment when some of those beds are lacking as well?
I think that it really varies. You know, we've had individuals who have sought treatment in other states with nonprofit service providers that offer that, and that might be a situation where we verify placement and treatment and can help with transportation costs. We have others who are in active use, where just placing them in a housing situation without any support might not be the best situation. And I think that's where we're realistic about the fact that we're not going to find housing for all 160 folks that are staying at Johnson Street today. But hopefully we can find a plan or a path to support them.
The other thing I will say, we have and will continue to advocate at the state and federal level for support. We live in a state that has not allocated a lot of support in this space. We will continue to articulate the need. We'll be a leader in that space. The Poverello Center and other homeless shelter providers around the state have been leaders in this space, to be working alongside legislation to get not only operations but also capital needs to help support their work. And we are right there alongside them, and we say it every day and all day when we meet with our legislators and our congressional delegation, that this is the kind of supports that we need to be working on together at the local, state, and federal level. This is possible if we wanted to across the country, and we just don't see the political will there, but we're going to keep expressing our desire to be a partner in that space.
Oh, sorry, real quick too. You know, as like coming off of this winter, having like a high number of like 200 people at the shelter, and you know, I know the number at Johnson Street and the POV kind of varies depending on the season and different factors, but you know, I guess, is there going to be any sort of look towards that prevention and diversion, you know, going into another winter when numbers kind of come up? You know, you might get the numbers down after the sprint, but then, you know, it's going to be winter soon after that. So I guess what's the plan going forward there?
Yeah, one of the things that we are really excited to see is that congregations in Missoula and members of the faith-based community have stepped in to provide some gaps that were needed this winter. So we had some congregations actually be able to provide some overnight stays, and they coordinated with Jill and her staff at Johnson Street and the Poverello to be able to get folks into temporary sleeping situations. We met with the houseless leaders yesterday, and we have a number of service providers that are they're rolling up their sleeves and saying we are going to continue to think about how we're putting housing solutions forward and be there when we need this kind of extreme weather responses. So those are the kind of folks that we're going to be continuing to coordinate with.
As far as the ARPA funding or other federal funding that's coming to an end here, is the Poverello going to see any of that affect you guys?
We're not receiving any ARPA funding at this time. I mean, except for, the money that was funded the Johnson Street shelter. So I guess no. Yeah.
That's good news.
Yeah, I have a question for you, and from the POB's perspective. I mean, is this something that you or the POB endorse as a sound policy decision, or just more something you're subject to?
I think it's something we knew was going to happen. Every year we don't know if we're going to get another year, and so certainly we have been appreciative of the past several years and the ability to provide shelter, and we're committed to helping and hopeful that we can help get people to better solutions. I mean, if 25 people get housed, that's 25 people that get housed. So.
Yep.
And one last thing for you guys. I wanted to ask you, we talked about this a little bit earlier, Mayor Davis, about the decision to not front this announcement with a more widely public process. I wanted to ask you to elaborate on that.
Sure.
Recognizing they were one-time dollars, but ultimately it's a pretty substantial budgetary decision that the city made without what we have seen in the past when it comes to budget conversations, which are a lot of hearings, opportunities for public comment, that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, thank you for the question, Austin. I'll say we're not in a budgetary process right now. And as stated at the beginning, we are on a 5-month runway here. So what I am really pleased about is not making this announcement while we're in budget deliberations. I don't think that would be fair to the guests at the shelter, and it certainly wouldn't be fair to the Poverello Center. And so by providing a 5-month runway, we're giving a very adequate plan by which we will unwind the shelter. And the funding reality that the city is facing will mean that we will not be proposing. We knew we had one-time funding that we could carry forward for FY25, and we know we do not for FY26. And so rather than wait until we are in the middle of city council deliberations for budget, it felt more responsible to provide this information now and coordinate with
It's already
the
in
guests.
place.
That is correct, and we're putting together a thoughtful unwind with the guests of the shelter and working with the Poverello Center and other service providers. We would certainly not want to do this in any quick fashion where we did it within a shorter period of time. This feels like a much more responsible way to unwind the situation.
And I think that the public has had their opportunity to weigh in through last year's budget cycle. Mm-hmm. Also, the ask for the crisis services levy was to find ongoing sustainable funding for these types of things. The community did not pass that. And so we have been funding and pivoting accordingly, and this is the spot we find ourselves in now. But with the contract we signed with the POB for 1 year, I feel like we have been in this is an ongoing conversation with our community that we've been having over the last couple of years.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, it's very true.
Summer of 2023, the fenced area that is now fenced off of the Poverello Center was cleaned up, fenced up. Is there a worry that the people who no longer have the resource of the Johnson Street shelter will head over there and use that as a possible place to stay?
We're very aware of that factor, and so we'll be working together to figure out how we can best serve folks that are in need of services that they're trying to access from the Poverello Center, and then also addressing needs that the neighbors have, and that is obviously an ongoing thing that we work together to find a balance there, and we're absolutely cognizant of that fact. We may be finding ourselves with some very interesting solutions that other communities have seen over time. I mean, you think about folks that have I'm trying to remember the name of it, but food trucks that go out that are basically providing food for folks as in different parts of town. We may maybe that is an option. We have we know of the Hope Rescue Mission, for example, has a day warming center. That might be a place where people are able to access food and some other resources. Churches have considered as part of our conversations leading up until now, but no announcements. But over time, people have stood up different kinds of like soup kitchens and things like that, just so people can access some meals. And again, those are often in coordination then with where people can take shelter. So I anticipate that this is just the start of this announcement, and then it will be an iterative process as we move forward. One thing that I will guarantee everybody here is that we will be learning lessons daily and applying those lessons to how we are implementing this plan.
And then one last question.
Yeah.
Closing down the shelter will essentially put 150 people over those few months without a place to stay. And you keep reiterating resources, but what happens to those people who are essentially waiting in line for those resources to come to them? And are they going to be penalized? I mean, there's the no camping ordinance in city parks. Where are they supposed to go?
Well, we'll continue to help people connect with permanent housing. We'll continue to help people connect with family and friends, and we'll help them continue to connect with better situations that might look like. And I get what everybody's saying here, that there's not a lot of treatment facilities open, but maybe available, but we'll be continuing to connect people with those resources. When it comes to people staying outside, the ordinance will remain in effect, and we'll continue to help people sleep outside effectively if that is their situation. I will say that we've put out a month. So it's not just a couple of months. It is a 5-month horizon here that we're looking at closing the shelter over, unwinding from April through August. And so our estimate, and these are estimates based on what our targets are and based on what we have thought here, is around 30 people per month that will be decreasing the occupancy of the shelter. And that is because we're basing it on, again, that model that we piloted over the holidays and some other factual and research that we've seen from other places, that we can get people connected to the resources I just talked about. So again, housing, family and friends, and other appropriate resources. We just met yesterday with, again, the houseless leaders, and we're talking about what are the kinds of vouchers that we can get from the state, our Human Resource Council, the Housing Authority. Everybody is going to be working all in on getting resources to the table and hopefully getting people housed. That's the goal.
I would just add to that, this conversation is focused a lot on obviously what our push is and then the number of beds that the community has. But I know we joke there's not really great best practices, but what we do know is if somebody stayed at the Johnson's shelter last night and is still there in August and there's no service to try and help them connect with resources to get out of that situation, that almost is perpetuating itself as well. And so if we try and focus on connecting people to housing and connecting people to resources, the hope is that we will kind of pull back on some of that. So I know that the questions all make a lot of sense on, well, where will people go? But we also haven't had a situation where we've kind of given this 5-month runway to say, hey, we aren't going to have as many beds available, but we are investing in resources to connect people. And so will you work with us? We'll work with you to try and, take people out of that situation where they're not waking up every morning and they don't know where they're going to sleep that night. Because our hope would be that people will kind of work and take advantage of this to find that more permanent solution.
Musical interlude.
That's the truth.
Actually, we're getting close.
I think, but also the other thing is that over the course of the last several years, the Johnson Street has at various points in time closed and then opened back up again. So we have had points in time where there has not been the Johnson Center to be able to be utilized. And so I think with the kind of situation we find ourselves in financially and some of the lessons that we learned over the Home for the Holidays, I mean, that was a pilot program, and I think we are, putting more resources, more effort, more staff time to really ramp that up, to take the lessons learned that were positive to put forward. We are, feeling like the 5-month plan, yes, it is not perfect, but we're not letting perfect be the enemy of good.
No. Exactly. A couple more questions and then we'll be wrapping up here. I just want to make sure folks that haven't had a chance yet have had the ability to ask questions here. Okay.
Maybe a question you might find a little friendlier. Whenever you talk about this in the context of the legislature's limitations that it puts on the city, and also there's some lawmakers sort of war on municipal levies right now. I know
Yeah.
the conversation about the not the emergency levy, but the levy that didn't pass earlier is definitely kind of a part of that
Right.
formula as well.
Yeah.
We talk about that political dynamic.
Oren, yes, thank you. It's been something. Senate Bill 204, I think, is the bill you're referring to that would have put a sunset on levies, and that wouldn't be just for the municipality. That would be for counties and other taxing jurisdictions as well. And that did not pass. And then that, because it's fundamentally a destabilizing element that certainly doesn't help contribute to our already challenging tax situation. The city of Missoula is very dedicated to finding workable tax reform at the state level to give our residents reprieve from property taxes. And we aren't finding there to be a lot of satisfactory movement, but there are some bills moving forward. We're going to keep pushing on those. In the meantime, we do have several legislators that wish to try to further limit revenue for local cities. If those folks are successful, local municipalities will continue to feel the demand from our citizens for greater services and needs, and have further limitations being able to deliver those. So it is of great concern to ours, and from the legislative perspective, we ask those legislators to work alongside municipalities to figure out a workable funding solution for our residents, both so it's manageable for renters and homeowners and businesses alike, and also a manageable budget situation so we can deliver on the ever-growing cost of services that it requires it to be a Class 1 city that Missoula is. Yeah.
I have one more quick thing. I want to go back to the $400,000 goal and ask how much this Housing Sprint's work is contingent on raising that amount. Is there work that can happen if less is pulled in? You know, is the city essentially relying on the goodwill of its population to fill that fund to make the Housing Sprint happen? Good work can happen. We won't need all $400,000 to start in the month of April, because again, we're going to start with actually not even quite 30, but we're looking at about 30 people that we're going to start with in the month of April to start getting connected to resources. If we are not able to pull together dollars, then we will identify the people that probably need that maybe less help that can get into housing first. That's not actually how we're thinking about this, because we know that there are folks living in shelter that can more easily get into permanent housing than others, and we don't want to put all of our resources there. We know that folks that are going to have some greater challenges and barriers equally need help to get into homes. So we think between the city and other local government, the city will be able to figure out ways that we can get this started. There's no doubt about that. And we are, however, asking for help from our community to be able to do this effectively. We are looking forward to the opportunity for some sort of a way to actually track this and demonstrate this on our website, so we can show the progress that we are making for our community, and to show where these dollars are being spent and how people are able to secure better housing as a result of it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Absolutely.
Just quickly, how do you kind of feel about heading into this with, Missoula's housing market as it is? I know things might be stabilizing a little bit per the report that recently came out, but rents are still increasing, and then the vouchers don't necessarily match up with the fair market rents. So I guess, what are the thoughts going into that?
Yeah, the city of Missoula's housing market has been and continues to be a challenge. I will say that we're about a 3% vacancy from what I heard from the Missoula Organization of Realtors report, and that's largely due to the progress that we have been making around we, and I say we, the royal we, our community, getting more homes built. When we saw the 2 large multifamily affordable apartments built, that was the Trinity Apartments and the Villaggio Apartments, we actually saw not only the vacancy rate increase, and so that get better for renters, we also saw a correlation in a decrease in our homelessness count. And so numbers, those numbers we can rely on, and we can say that the more we can continue to try to get homes built, we will, which is why we're leaning into the code reform project. So the city council adopted our new land use plan in December, and that land use plan calls for more homes to be built in every neighborhood. And so the code reform that our staff are now working on to bring forward to the City Council and the public as early as April will be addressing all of our building codes, streamlining our building code process in order to for the private sector to be able to respond and get more homes built more quickly. So.
And I would just add to that churn in a housing market is important. So one of the exciting things the city has been partners with is the Revar project, which is going to result in the largest deed-restricted, permanently affordable community land trust ownership opportunities in the state of Montana. And generally, folks who might qualify to have those home ownership opportunities will most likely open up housing opportunities in the rental market for folks. So it kind of takes those next steps, and those are the types of things that there's no one solution. So all of those things the city's trying to do all at once, we're trying to build it together to connect and make a difference.
Well, and I think we are doing our part as a municipality to try to address some of these solutions. But really, as Mayor Davis said, we are lacking in the partnership at the legislative level. And, the state of Montana has $1 billion surplus. That could go a long ways to putting more money into the tax credit fund or the or affordable housing fund at the state level. And there seems to be not a lot of appetite to do that, and which is frustrating because, it has ongoing positive ramifications for the entire community. It's not just, if Missoula does well, that doesn't have ripple effects all across the state. More income taxes, more, people, not needing as many resources. And so talking with legislators in Helena and trying to educate them on the fact that how municipal governments are funded, the limitations that they are putting on us and how it's making it harder for us to do the services that we are tasked with. But these are also their same constituents. And we are the lowest level of government and have the most interaction with them. And they can come to us every Monday night, and often they do. And it's really frustrating, the disconnect between that, because it is their constituents as well that we are trying to serve. And we are, have a commitment to try to make people's lives better, and we hope that they join us in that.
Yeah, and just to add on that, it can be frustrating at the local level because the realities of situations that every other level of government removed from the local level can ignore, we really can't. And so some of the questions you all asked are very valid about connecting people to services that we might not be able to fund. When the reality is that local governments were never set up, and we do not have the authorization to fund a lot of these services like rehab and services such as that. And we could point to a couple sessions ago when caseworkers were cut at the state level, and you could see a direct tie-in to what is happening locally. And it's almost like an unfunded mandate, except at the same time they're putting an unfunded mandate down, they're also putting handcuffs on the ability for us to generate revenue to fund it. So sorry to get off on a soapbox on the state legislature.
You guys asked.
Yeah.
All right, we're at 2:00. One last question here. Yeah, Griffin.
This is for Jill and Aaron. So they recently got 160 beds for Johnson Street, and they also have the permanent bathrooms. Can you tell us what are happening?
Modular bathrooms. They're modular.
Modular.
By purpose.
Yeah.
The bathrooms, it sounds like.
We are going to work with the county and the United Way and the Hope Rescue Mission to get those over to the temporary safe outdoor space. So, as you know, the temporary safe outdoor space on West Broadway, they have some bathrooms that need some attention. And when we built those modular showers and bathrooms for the Johnson Street facility, we planned for just that they were modular and they could move somewhere where they were needed. So they will be with the TSOS. We're very excited about that.
And the beds, I think we're going to have discussion about where they can be used, whether it's the POV or a combination of service providers.
Yeah, we think that they'll go to good use.
Oh, yeah.
We do know that. Yeah.
In Missoula, or are you thinking maybe you send them to other places?
The beds at the POV are 10 years old, so
Yeah, we would love to benefit. You bet.
Yeah.
We'd love to see what happens here in Missoula. Yeah, and then we'll be doing everything we can. I mean, the city of Missoula has a policy to proactively deconstruct our buildings, and so we'll be making sure that we are reusing everything that we possibly can over at that site, from not only just a fiscal responsibility perspective, but also from an environmental responsibility. So we'll work to reduce the amount of garbage that goes into the landfill and repurpose as much as we can over there.
Really quick.
Okay.
Zoning wise,
Yeah.
that area you're saying you want to put housing in more neighborhoods. is this area where it would get demolished, the Johnson Street shelter, would houses go there? Do you know what would go there?
Oh, man.
Actually, it's a great question because the other part of the resolution that council passed a few years ago was requiring the city to undertake master planning, and that actually started this week with the first public meeting around what the neighborhood and what the broader community envisions there. I would absolutely expect housing to be a part of that. If you looked at the kind of vision boards in the open house, a lot of people talked about deed restricted housing and things like that. Obviously, we need partners. We need to kind of work on that sort of thing together, but I would expect the housing that might end up there to be in line with the neighborhood.
Yeah, agreed. So I have 3 public service announcements to wrap this up. One, that public process to envision what the North MRL Triangle will be. We have a virtual stakeholder survey, a virtual workshop, actually it's called a virtual workshop survey, and that is on our Engage Missoula page for North MRL Triangle, right? That's what it's called. And fantastic to get people's perspectives on that. There are additional open houses coming up over the course of this period. The next one will be in June. So we encourage people to come to that. We had a lot of people that came on Wednesday night, so it was very encouraging to see. The other things I just want to repeat myself that for this particular effort around the phased unwind of the Johnson Street Emergency Shelter and the housing sprint, we're asking the community to contribute to the Johnson Street housing sprint through the United Way. We are asking folks to consider volunteering with the Housing Advocate Network. And then we invite landlords to this conversation. We have many landlords in our community that are already partners in this space. They are partners with the Missoula Housing Authority, with the Poverello Center, with the Human Resource Council, with the YWCA, with a lot of organizations that are working to get folks that are vulnerable, people with vulnerabilities, into a home. And we have landlords that ask us all the time, how can we help, or how can I be part of this? We welcome landlords to reach out, and they can reach out to the City of Missoula's Houseless Programs team, and the email is in our frequently asked questions on our website, but we really would encourage folks in any way they think they might be able to help to reach out, because there's a lot of hands that are needed here. Thank you very much for the time today. We really appreciate it, and look forward to keeping you apprised of the progress here. Thank you.
And Griffin, I was not dogging on Great Falls. I was actually born there, so
I didn't say you're dogging on Great Falls.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
I know.
Thank you.
I never get a ticket. It'll be this. I forgot to pay for parking.
Oh, you have that?
Yeah, of course. I'm going to throw some on there right now.
Thank you for your great questions. Appreciate it.
We've met before. Emily with KPAX. I normally own you were at the government side. Zach Wilhelm is going to be a federal reporter lately after Catherine Rowley left. Zach is off on Fridays, so I got the privilege to be here today. Thank you. Studied ethics in college, so
yeah, right on. All right.
But thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah, and this is somebody's piece. I'm not sure who this might be. Oh, great. Okay. Thank you. Just make sure you didn't walk out, but you're probably quite accustomed to later have that.
Yeah.
Tell me who you're with again.
NBC.
Thank you. I'm sorry I forgot.
Yeah, of course. Parker.
Parker. Great to see you.
Good to see you.
Thanks for your good question.